Our next item of business is First Minister's questions, and I call Russell Finlay at question number 1.
Thank you, President Officer. If a Scottish Government Minister misleads this Parliament and by extension misleads the public, should they correct the record?
First Minister.
The arrangements for so doing are set out clearly, and they will be applied where that's necessary to do so.
Russell Finlay.
That was as clear as mud. John Swinney often talks about integrity when his party and his government have none. He denied that his Justice Secretary broke the ministerial code until the Scottish Conservatives proved that she had done so not once but twice. And John Swinney shows exactly the same disregard for integrity and facts when it comes to taxation. Here are the facts. More Scottish workers pay more income tax than those elsewhere in the United Kingdom. Yet John Swinney falsely accuses me of misleading Parliament when I state this hard fact, and then he doesn't correct the record. Now, I know that the SNP's culture of dishonesty will never change, but does John Swinney at least agree that Scots are paying too much tax?
First Minister.
First things first, Presiding Officer, the arrangements in relation to the scrutiny of ministerial conduct have been strengthened by the arrangements that I have put in place. And the system of independent advisers being able to explore and examine cases at their own volition without reference from me has only been provided by the actions that I have taken as First Minister to set the highest tests for accountability and scrutiny that have to be in place at all times. So
let's hear the First Minister.
That is only possible because of the arrangements that I have put in place as First Minister. And in relation to the substantive point that Russell Finlay puts to me, the Independent Scottish Fiscal Commission forecasts show that most Scottish taxpayers are expected to pay less income tax this year, 2025-26, than they would if they lived in the rest of the United Kingdom. And I'm happy to put that point on the record in Parliament today.
Russell Finlay.
So he's strengthened accountability by dishing out a get-out-of-jail-free card to all his SNP pals. That's one way of doing it. Taxes are too high in Scotland. Scots are forced, not asked, to pay £1.7 billion extra a year through SNP income tax rises. Yet they see a wasteful government utterly incapable of fixing public services that only get worse, as demonstrated once again today with the revelation that bed blocking costs the NHS up to £500 million every single year. The SNP's list of costly failures is truly endless. Struggling workers, families and businesses, they all deserve a break. That's why in next week's budget we're calling on John Swinney to reduce the crippling financial burden by cutting income tax. So will he do so?
First Minister.
In relation to public services, the recent data that came out on Tuesday demonstrates that for the 6th month in a row, long waits in our National Health Service are falling. In some circumstances, they have fallen by 30% since the start of the financial year. From the plan that I put in place, the resources I put in place, long waits coming down just as I promised they would do for patients the length and breadth of our country. So the key point I would say to Russell Finlay is that the investment we're making in public services is delivering the better outcomes for people in our country. Now, the delayed discharge report from Audit Scotland today demonstrates that there is a necessity for us to work collaboratively with local authorities to tackle that issue, and that good work is highlighted in the Audit Scotland report. Of course, this government recognised the need for that intervention with the National Care Service proposals, but the Conservatives and others would not support those proposals when they came to Parliament.
Thank you.
And the
Let's hear one another.
And the last thing I will say, to Mr Finlay about his tax cut proposals is that, yes, his proposals involve cutting tax, but they also involve cutting public spending by £1 billion, and he never answers that question.
Russell Finlay.
When it comes to the state of the NHS in Scotland under the SNPs, John Swinney's selective statistics do not cut it. Patients know the reality. They see the reality with their own eyes. John Swinney thinks that he can take more and more from workers and businesses, and at the same time spend more and more on benefits. The SNP's annual benefits bill of £7 billion is on course to reach £10 billion. That's £10 billion a year. State benefits are a vital safety net for those in need, but this is unaffordable, it's unfair and it's unsustainable. And the only way that John Swinney can pay for this is by hiking taxes even more. But there is another way. We believe that workers should keep more of their hard-earned money.
Let's hear Mr.
And this
Finlay.
will help to increase prosperity by growing the economy. John Swinney could cut people's taxes in this budget by tackling the out-of-control benefits bill, but does he have the bravery to do so?
First Minister.
Since the start of this financial year, new outpatient waits over 52 weeks have fallen by 31%. Since the start of this...
First Minister, just a moment. I'm very conscious of the number of members who've advised me they'd like to put questions today. That will be made far more likely if we can hear one another. First Minister.
So, President Officer, just so that colleagues can hear my remarks, since the start of this financial year, new outpatient waits over 52 weeks have fallen by 31%. Since the start of this financial year, inpatient and day case waits over 52 weeks have fallen by 28.6%. Every single month falls in the levels of these waiting lists. So that is the plans that I put in place, delivering patient benefits for real people in our society. Now, when it comes to social security investment, what this government has done has invested in measures such as the Scottish Child Payment, which means that child poverty is falling in Scotland when it's rising in other parts of the United Kingdom, and we have child poverty levels that are at 30-year lows in Scotland as a consequence of our intervention. Now, I know that Mr Finlay doesn't care about child poverty. I know that the implications of Mr Finlay's policies are to reduce support for vulnerable people in our society, and as a consequence, more children will be subjected to poverty by the callous actions of the Conservative Party. Well, we will have none of that on these benches. We will stand beside the families of Scotland, reducing poverty and making sure that there's opportunity for all within Scotland.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, Audit Scotland's report on delayed discharge is damning and should shame John Swinney and the SNP government. It reveals that in the last year, over 720,000 bed days were lost to delayed discharge. That is almost 750,000 clinically unnecessary days in hospital in a single year for patients cleared to leave, but many trapped because they can't get a care package. 720,000. That is nearly 2,000 bed days lost every single day. And that is the real-life consequence of almost 20 years of John Swinney and the SNP. So isn't this just 720,000 more reasons why Scotland needs a new government and new leadership?
First Minister.
Sir, I welcome the report from Audit Scotland because it highlights the importance of tackling the issue of delayed discharge, which has been a priority for this government and which is recognised in the Audit Scotland report. Now, when we look at the substance of the delayed discharge issue, Audit Scotland highlight the complexities involved, but they also highlight that delayed discharge only affects 3% of patients within our health system. So 97% of patients leave hospital without delay. Now, there are complex challenges that have to be addressed, which is why I welcome the observation in the Audit Scotland report that Scotland's population health framework, the Health and Social Care Service Renewal Framework and the NHS Operational Improvement Plan offer an opportunity to make progress with a common focus on prevention. So what that means is that Audit Scotland are recognising the arrangements this government has put in place to work with our partners to address the substance of the delayed discharge problem, and that will be my priority in taking forward this activity.
Anna Sarwar.
Officer, that was a pathetic answer from a First Minister who promised to eradicate delayed discharge a decade ago and proves he's out of touch and out of time. And this is the damning consequence of his 20 years in government that he has to own. 720,000 bed days lost in 1 year. The SNP's failure to deal with delayed discharge cost taxpayers and our NHS over £440 million a year. Hundreds of millions wasted while waiting lists remain too long and staff feel unsupported. Audit Scotland warn the system cannot function as intended. No grip from the centre, no clear accountability, no effective oversight, and all this has human consequences. Some patients have been forced to wait more than 6 months in hospital after they've been medically cleared to leave. So why is John Swinney so willing to dismiss not just the financial cost of his failure, but the human cost of this SNP government too?
First Minister.
One of the important points at the heart of the Audit Scotland report is the need for there to be the deepest level of integration between health and social care services in Scotland. And the government tried to do something about that by the work that we brought forward on the National Care Service, and the Labour Party would not support us despite a policy commitment to support
Let's
the
hear
National
one
Care
another.
Service. Now, what that means is that the Labour Party say one thing in one context and another thing in a different context. And what's my evidence for that? Well, my evidence for that is on Monday, Anna Sarwar claimed that in Scotland, waiting lists continue to rise. Yesterday, Anna Sarwar admitted that waiting lists are coming down in Scotland. So between Monday and Wednesday, Mr Sarwar doesn't understand if waiting lists are going up or coming down. What it means is that Mr Sarwar just simply makes it up as he goes along, and the people of Scotland are seeing through that.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, John Swinney is not living in the real world. He thinks Scotland's problems are because of the opposition.
Let's hear Mr
Sarwar. A man
Sarwar.
that's been in government for 20 years, and in just 4 months, Scotland can get rid of this useless SNP government because Scotland's NHS is not safe in John Swinney's hands. He ignores the evidence.
Let's hear Mr Sarwar.
He ignores the evidence, he ignores the experts, he ignores the patients sharing their heartbreaking stories, and he ignores the doctors and the nurses on the front line. So will he ignore the damning words from Alec Neil, his colleague for more than 20 years and a former SNP Health Secretary, who said, "A friend of mine waited 3 hours for an ambulance and then 33 hours on a trolley at Ayr Hospital last week before being allocated a bed." The First Minister's claim that the Scottish NHS has turned a corner is rubbish. Scotland's hospitals are in deep crisis and need urgent action now. He's right. John Swinney's talking rubbish, isn't he?
First Minister.
Well, I come back to the information that I set out to Mr Finlay a moment ago, that when I set out the plans in the first budget under my leadership as First Minister to tackle long waits in Scotland, that has resulted in a 31% reduction in new outpatient waits and a 28.6% reduction in inpatient and day case waits. Sustained progress over a 6-month period. So that says to me that the National Health Service is making the recovery it needs to make from the COVID pandemic that affected us all. Now, Mr Sarwar is very good at dishing out his advice. 18 months ago, he advised the people of Scotland to elect Labour MPs. And yesterday, he described those Labour MPs as idiotic. That tells us all we need to know, that Anas Sarwar is not living in the real world, that what he said to the people of this country 18 months ago to vote Labour has proved to be a disaster, because he's now describing those Labour MPs as idiots. I think what the people of Scotland are now realising is that Anas Sarwar offers nothing in new leadership to Scotland, and that what the SNP will do is get on with delivering for the people of Scotland, and that's what we're doing just now.
I appreciate that we don't work in a library, but we do have to treat one another with some more courtesy and respect. I want those gathered to hear what is being said by those who've been called to speak. Question number 3, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, the First Minister is playing down the problem of delayed discharge, but he should tell that to everyone waiting for an ambulance or waiting in a corridor or who've had their operation cancelled this morning because our hospitals are full. In November 2024, 62-year-old Margaret McGill was rushed to hospital. She'd become paralysed from the waist down with a rare spinal condition known as cauda equina. They think it's caused by lifting both her disabled son and the patients in her care as an auxiliary nurse and then as a social care worker herself. Margaret has been in hospital, first in Regmore, now in Wick, for over 400 days. The family home was adapted and ready for her last April. The ramps were installed, doors widened, a whole extension's been built. What's missing are the carers, the staff she needs to drop by to help her. So Margaret is still in hospital. Her husband, Cathal, told me this morning that she is a positive and vibrant woman, but she is struggling. She just wants to get out of hospital. So can the First Minister tell me, what is it going to take to get Margaret home?
Minister.
Well, I'm sorry to hear the circumstances that Mr McGill is experiencing, but some of the steps that Mr Cole-Hamilton has outlined are positive steps with the adaptations that have been put in place in the family home to enable Mrs McGill to be able to come there. So there are practical steps being taken in the right direction, but the challenge is the availability of carers. And I acknowledge that is a difficulty in many areas of Scotland, but especially acute in rural areas where the working age population is not as large as we would want it to be. Hence why Mr Cole-Hamilton and I are probably agreed that we've got to have a constructive approach to migration issues to try to boost our rural population. Now, I know that there is a very active focus on meeting the social care challenges in the Highlands, and I'm very happy to receive details about the particular case and identify what further steps can be taken to assist in that respect.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Presiding Officer, those adaptations in Margaret's home are of no use to her for every day that she's remained stuck in that hospital. And the brutal irony of this story is that Margaret herself was a care worker. Throughout her career, she has offered support that is now unavailable to her. She should have been home within 14 weeks, but she's been in hospital now for 14 months. It's happening the length and breadth of the country. Scotland deserves better than this. That's why my party has made care a priority in our discussions over the Scottish budget. It's now been 10 years since Shona Robertson, as Health Secretary, promised to get rid of delayed discharge altogether. Yet 2,000 people are marooned in hospital every single day. It's a care bottleneck that means cancelled surgeries, endless waits in A&E, and ambulances stacking up outside hospitals. This morning, we learned that it's costing the NHS at least £1.2 million a day, but the cost to Margaret and people like her is incalculable. So can I ask the First Minister, when will the penny finally drop for the SNP that you cannot fix the crisis in our NHS until you've fixed care?
First Minister.
Well, I think that's been reflected by the budget decisions that we've taken to expand support for social care, which came in the budget that Mr Cole-Hamilton supported, which is the current financial year's budget that Mr Cole-Hamilton supported after negotiation. I welcome that negotiation with the government because we need to. The government doesn't have a majority. We need to work with others to agree the financial provisions. So that dialogue is essential to make sure social care can be adequately funded. Now, what the Audit Scotland report does, it highlights some of the complexity of cases that Mr Cole-Hamilton puts to me. It also highlights the challenges about recruitment, particularly in remote and rural areas, which I'm not disputing that at all. That's why I've taken steps to make it more practical and possible for people who come to this country to work in our care service, people who've been abandoned by the changes to care arrangements by the immigration rules of the United Kingdom Government, where I've taken steps to make sure more of those individuals can work in our care service. And I give Mr Cole-Hamilton the assurance that where there are practical and pragmatic steps that we can take to do that, we will do exactly that.
Question number 4, Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking to support those affected by fuel poverty in light of the recent rise in energy prices and their potential impact on the cost of living for households across Scotland.
First Minister.
President Officer, the Scottish Government delivers the strongest package of winter heating support available anywhere in the United Kingdom. We continue to use the powers available to raise incomes and improve energy efficiency, including increased funding for Warmer Homes Scotland, investing over £196 million in winter heating benefits and providing a further £1 million this year to expand energy bill debt advice services. However, the main levers for addressing fuel poverty, such as energy prices and market reform, are reserved. We have repeatedly called on the UK Government to introduce targeted bill discounts to reduce the number of households in fuel poverty by around 135,000.
Karen Adam.
I thank the First Minister for that answer, and I commend the measures outlined by the First Minister, and I'm proud that at a time when people are struggling, that this SNP government is providing the strongest package of winter support than anywhere else in the UK. The Labour Party promised to cut energy bills by £300, but households are nearly £200 worse off. Any politician from Scotland worth their salt should be demanding better for Scotland. And while the UK Government continues to deliver nothing but broken promises, does the First Minister agree that it is only through independence that we can prioritise Scotland's interests and actually reduce energy bills?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, Karen Adam makes the very strong point that the people of Scotland were promised a reduction in their fuel bills by the Labour Government, and their fuel bills have gone up. Another broken promise from the Labour Government. And she's also right that in Scotland, an energy-rich country, constituents of Ms Adams and others are facing fuel poverty because the energy wealth of Scotland is not being deployed to benefit the people of Scotland. And the only way that can happen is with independence, and this party is going to deliver that.
Brief supplementary, Audrey Nicholl.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And this week, severe weather has seen the UK's power demand reach a 7-year high as households struggle to keep warm through the winter storms. Yet, in energy-rich Scotland, this power demand sits alongside skyrocketing energy bills as families pee through the nose to heat their homes. So does the First Minister agree with me that the sooner Scotland's energy is in the hands of Scotland's people, the better for lower bills, economic growth and meaningful community ownership?
Hopefully the First Minister will have heard that. I would ask those who are shouting from their seats to cease. First Minister.
Presiding Officer, Audrey Nicholl makes the very important point that we live in an energy-rich country, but we also live in a country that is high in fuel poverty, and that's because of the decisions of the United Kingdom energy market. So Audrey Nicholl is absolutely right. The sooner these issues are in the hands of the people of Scotland, where we can make the energy wealth of Scotland work for the benefit of the people of Scotland, the sooner the better.
Question number 5, Pam Gossel.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to the Police Scotland's figures showing a 10% increase in reported domestic abuse crimes over the past 12 months.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, domestic abuse is abhorrent and we must end it. Multiple factors lie behind this statistic, including a greater willingness of victims to report crimes, the justice system taking them seriously and pursuing action against the perpetrators, in most cases men. Our Equally Safe strategy sets out preventative actions to stop such violence from occurring in the first place, and our £21.6 million annual funding supports projects such as Equally Safe at School and Mentors in Violence Prevention, as well as building capability and capacity of services for their vital work to support survivors.
Pam Gossel.
I thank the First Minister for that response, but let's be clear here. Last year, 66,000 domestic abuse incidents were recorded in Scotland. That's 1 every 8 minutes. This isn't a one-off spike. Incidents rose last year, again this year, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, with many cases sadly going unreported. Behind every figure is a real-life example of a person, primarily a woman, whose life has been shattered. Survivors are sick of the same old excuses. They need real action now. So will the First Minister back my Prevention of Domestic Abuse Scotland bill, which gives the authorities power to intervene early and to stop abuse from happening in the first place?
First Minister.
Sir, I believe this government has taken very significant action to ensure that the perpetrators of domestic violence are brought to justice. And the increase in the number of crimes that are being reported and the number of prosecutions that are being successfully achieved is testament to the fact that the prevention of domestic abuse and the pursuing of those who perpetrate this heinous crime is taken deadly seriously within the government, and the data demonstrates how that is taken forward. So I am at one with Pam Gossel in the determination to make sure that we tackle domestic violence. Now, when it comes to, so I say all of that because of what I'm about to say, which is that the government has considered carefully the bill that Pam Gossel brings forward. We have concerns with how the proposals would work in practice, and we do not believe that the proposals in the bill are able to be supported because of the nature of those proposals and the fact that they would not provide the additional, any additional emphasis or effectiveness in the domestic abuse arrangements. We have arrangements in place which allow multi-agency public protection arrangements and the disclosure scheme for domestic abuse in Scotland, which gives people the right to ask about the background of their partner, and to Police Scotland the power to tell people that they may be at risk, even where this has not been asked for. These are very, very strong arrangements we already have in place, and we regrettably do not believe that Pam Gossel's bill will add to the effectiveness of those provisions. But I reiterate our absolute determination to do all that we can to tackle domestic abuse as a heinous crime in our society.
Question number 6, Ariane Burgess.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister to provide an update on the rollout of the £2 bus fare pilot agreed as part of the 2025 to 26 budget negotiations.
First Minister.
So, following an expression of interest process with our regional transport partnerships, I am pleased to confirm that we will work jointly with Hightrans and ZTrans to deliver the bus fare cap pilot. The initiative aims to make bus travel more affordable, improve access for low-income communities and support sustainable travel for people in Highland, Moray, Argyll and Bute, Western Isles, Orkney and Shetland. We look forward to progressing the phased launch of the pilot later this month, subject to finalising its design and operation.
Ariane Burgess.
I am delighted that my region of the Highlands and Islands will be the first to benefit from this new approach to affordable buses proposed and delivered by the Scottish Greens. Can the First Minister outline how this scheme will be promoted and supported to maximise uptake in these areas, and how it will contribute to reducing car dependency and cutting transport emissions as part of Scotland's climate commitments?
First Minister.
So the bus fare cap pilot is one of a range of measures the government is taking to address poverty and to support households and also to enable individuals to have the choice, the credible choice and the affordable choice of utilising public transport. So this represents a significant milestone, and it enables us to work with our partners to promote this as a means of making bus travel more affordable, to improve access for low-income communities and to support sustainable travel for people across the High Trans and Z-Trans areas. And we will, of course, learn important lessons from the application of this pilot, which has been the product of good, constructive cross-party working between the Government and the Scottish Green Party in relation to the budget, and I'm delighted to commend that today.
Question number 7, Jackie Baillie.
Ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking following reports that the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital released the wrong body for cremation.
First Minister.
President Officer, I'm deeply concerned by the situation and extend my sympathies to the families affected. The arrangements and requirements for caring for the deceased require that dignity and respect and the correct procedures are followed at all times. NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde and the Inspector of Funeral Directors are investigating the circumstances of this case, and I expect to see the outcome of this investigation shortly.
Jackie Baillie.
Can I thank the First Minister for his response? He was, of course, told of the tragic circumstances at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, where the wrong remains were sent for cremation and the devastation it has caused for 2 families. But this isn't the first incident at the hospital of this nature, and it's unfortunately not the last, with the body of a 96-year-old grandmother sent to the wrong funeral directors. Will the First Minister publish the investigation report by the Inspector of Burials, Cremations and Funeral Directors? Can he advise if that inspector's powers extend to hospital morgues, and if not, whether he agrees that the matter is reported to the police? Finally, why, when the Burial and Cremation Act was passed by this Parliament in 2016, has his government been so slow to deliver change, taking 9 years bringing forward regulations? Does he consider that that delay has let down people caught up in the funeral parlour ashes scandal that I brought to light in 2024, and now lets down those who do not have their loved ones' remains because of shocking NHS blunders?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the implementation of the Burial and Cremation Scotland Act 2016 is being taken forward, and most of the provisions are in place, and indeed there is further recruitment of individuals as part of that implementation process. In relation to this particular case, I'll explore the questions about publication of the inspectorate reports. I think it would be a good thing if it's possible, but I simply have to confirm whether there's details that would be difficult to put into the public domain. But I think it is important to do so to address the issues of public confidence, which Jackie Baillie puts to me, and which I recognise the importance of those questions. So I will explore that point and write to Jackie Baillie, but it is important there is public confidence around all of these arrangements, which must take place, and the principles of dignity and respect must be applied. And I express once again my sympathy to the families that have been affected by this terrible experience.
Sandesh Gulhani.
A declaration of interest as a practising NHS GP. A few weeks ago, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Glasgow released the wrong body, which was cremated, denying 2 families a goodbye. But this is not an isolated incident. The body of 56-year-old William Patterson was released to the wrong funeral director. A mum was left in a mortuary for 6 weeks, with staff telling the family she had been forgotten. And 96-year-old Agnes Lane's remains were released to the wrong funeral firm at a time when families should be grieving. These mistakes are unacceptable, causing significant distress. With this catalogue of significant never events, what steps are being taken to hold senior management to account? And they always seem to escape scot-free.
First Minister.
President Officer, the Government has in place a range of measures to tackle these issues, which, the guidance is in place, which requires robust checking before any body is released from a hospital mortuary to an undertaker. We have also the Inspector of Burial, Cremation and Funeral Directors appointed by Scottish Ministers, and along with that, a statutory funeral director code of practice which regulates many of these issues. So I assure Dr Gulhani that the arrangements are in place to ensure that the highest standards are applied, the accuracy is implicit in all of the actions that are taken forward, and I give Parliament the commitment that where we can publish information in this respect, we will do so.
Thank you. We move to constituency and general supplementaries. Concise questions and responses will enable more opportunities. I call Michelle Thompson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Late yesterday, the Scottish Times reported that the Scottish Government has written to the UK Government's Advocate General to inform her that, should their other legal arguments against the ruling of the Supreme Court in favour of 4 Women Scotland fail, they wish a further remedy to be explored in the form of a declaration of incompatibility on human rights grounds. At the same time, multiple statements from the First Minister and others in Cabinet have been made in this chamber that they fully accept the Supreme Court ruling and are working to implement it. Presiding Officer, I'm confused. I'm not asking for comment on any legal action, but I am asking how the statements made in this chamber are compatible with the actions taken in secret by the Scottish Government.
First Minister.
President Officer, in this respect, there are live legal proceedings underway, and there will be elements of my comments that are restricted because of that fact. But what the government is doing is exactly what we told Parliament we were doing, which is taking forward the steps to ensure that we have the correct guidance arrangements in place to deal with the implications of the Supreme Court ruling. And that is the work the Government is undertaking and is always undertaking in this respect.
Carol Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Earlier this week, reports revealed that the A&E department at Crosshouse Hospital and NHS Ayrshire and Arm exceeded capacity by 50% this December. Staff had no choice but to care for and treat patients in corridors. Now, to be clear, this is not just a winter issue. Crosshouse A&E exceeded capacity during 7 months last year. So can the First Minister advise what progress has been made in capturing data on corridor care at both a national and local level so that we might finally understand the true scale of this risk to staff and patients?
First Minister.
This is work that we are undertaking in collaboration with health boards around the country to ensure that we have in place sustainable arrangements in accident and emergency. But that's also part of a whole system approach which involves the role of the Scottish Ambulance Service and NHS 24, because there's an increasing proportion of patients are being supported by the Scottish Ambulance Service when they are called to either homes or businesses or other locations to avoid individuals being transported to hospitals if they can be sustainably supported in another situation. And then obviously there are a range of other sources of advice available to ensure that individuals' health needs are met. Now, I visited myself during the Christmas break the Accident and Emergency Department at Glasgow Royal Infirmary, which was operating, yes, under pressure, but it was operating in a sustainable fashion on the occasion that I was there. And there has been, in other circumstances around the country, there has been stress and challenge within the A&E system and other areas where there has been sustainable handling of the cases with which we are wrestling. But I give Carol Mockin the assurance that we are working to ensure there is a sustainable availability of services right across the country, and that will be focused on Crosshouse Hospital as much as anywhere else in the country.
Douglas Lumsden.
Sir, yesterday journalists at STV took strike action protesting at job cuts that would lead to the end of a separate news bulletin coming from the north of Scotland. I commend and support them for taking a stand defending local journalism. So can I ask the First Minister if there is any pressure that the Government can put on STV and Ofcom to help maintain a dedicated news service for the north east of Scotland?
First Minister.
Well, President, I agree entirely with Mr Lumsden about the importance of the distinctive news output and the substantive news output from STV North. There have been some amended proposals brought forward, but I stress the word substantive. I think what the alternative proposals that have emerged will lead to that erosion of substantive news output from STV North. The Cabinet Secretary for Constitution, External Affairs and Culture has provided an update to Richard Leonard yesterday on his meetings with the NUJ, STV and Ofcom, and the Government has made representations to Ofcom. We've been in dialogue with STV, and I reaffirm the position that we have taken all along, that a distinctive and substantive news output from STV North is what is required, and it's what the journalists of that organisation deserve, because they do an outstanding job in reflecting those issues. And actually, the weather circumstances of the last few days have rather made the point powerfully, because the circumstances in the north of Scotland have been acutely more challenging than the rest of the country, and that's been reflected in the distinctive and substantive news coverage of STV North. So I think the recent events of recent days make Mr Lumsden's point.
Thank you, John Barr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As we've just heard this week, STV journalists and production workers have been on strike in response to the proposed cuts to STV North in Aberdeen. And I know the First Minister is aware of the vital role local news plays in keeping communities informed. So does he agree that we must protect local journalism and demand the STV to think again, negotiate with its workforce and resolve this dispute to benefit both the workers and the communities they serve in the north east of Scotland?
First Minister.
In the light of these exchanges, I will make sure there are renewed representations made by the Government to STV and to Ofcom, because for all the reasons that I've put on the record today to Douglas Lumsden, and I reiterate them to my colleague Jackie Dunbar, it is important that we protect substantive and distinctive news coverage from STV North, and that's an important commitment to public service broadcasting in Scotland.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On Tuesday, I asked the First Minister what help could be given to the North and North East during this period of extreme weather in the face of severe council budget challenges. Since then, the situation has worsened, with further falls overnight and ice everywhere. Now, Tim Eagle MSP has suggested the Government coordinate resource sharing between councils, and Andrew Bowie MP has suggested calling out the military. Is the First Minister sympathetic to these solutions, and in any event, what further support can the Government offer to help the people of the North and North East during this extreme weather?
First Minister.
As I acknowledged on Tuesday, I recognise the severity of the issues that have been wrestled with, principally in the North East, but also in the Highlands, the Northern Isles and in the Western Isles. Now, we have had, at some time since Friday, an amber warning in place Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday and Tuesday in these areas. So the situation has been very acute. Now, the dialogue that's taken place with local resilience partnerships has resulted in the making available of snow clearing equipment by AME, the Trunk Roads Network Company, to Aberdeenshire Council. So there has been a mutual aid arrangement put in place, and other local authorities have been part of putting in place mutual aid because of the severity of the conditions in the North East. Now, no agency has requested additional support from either the Scottish Government or the Ministry of Defence beyond those arrangements, but we are in constant contact with the resilience partnerships in the North East. We had an extensive further follow-up discussion on Tuesday evening, specifically with Aberdeenshire Council and on behalf of the Resilience Partnership, and we've been working closely with local authorities and health boards. But I assure Mr Kerr that we are in active dialogue to identify if there is any other additional practical assistance that can be offered. The last point I would make is that we're now in a period where there is a relaxation of the intensity of the weather, so the ability to apply measures to recover the situation is a greater opportunity in the absence of amber warnings, and that will be the priority for the next few days.
Mercedes Villalba.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister has said that he cannot see how international law has been respected by the United States in its military intervention in Venezuela, and has said that the international community must now ensure that de-escalation, diplomacy and democracy follow. While it is the case that defence is a matter reserved to the UK Government, Wick John O'Groats Airport is Scottish Government owned, so reports that it is being used to support US military operations in relation to Venezuela are alarming. So can I ask whether the First Minister was made aware of the intention to use this airport to support yesterday's action, and given his expressed views, what assurance can he give to my constituents in the North East that their Scottish Government-owned infrastructure is not being used as a staging post to violate international law?
First Minister.
I think we've got to be really careful here about the different issues that are at stake here. The comments that I made at the start of this week about the situation in Venezuela are a matter of the public record, and I reaffirm those comments today. I believe in the international rules-based system, but having listened carefully to what has been said by the United States administration, I cannot see how international law has been respected in that case. Now, that is one circumstance. There is another circumstance, which is the incident involving the tanker. Now, I have, and the Government has, no knowledge as to whether or not aircraft that landed at Wick Airport on the morning of the 7th of January, yesterday, were involved in that initiative. We have no knowledge of whether that is the case or not. What I can tell Parliament, for transparency, is that Wick Airport is regularly used by aircraft to refuel, to enable them to make journeys across the Atlantic and into the Arctic areas. That has been a long-standing part of activity, but Hans Ans Airports Limited do not scrutinise the basis on which any requests for landing are made in these circumstances. But I stress the Government and Hans Ans Airports do not have any knowledge of whether the aircraft that landed yesterday were used in the US-UK operation against the Russian tanker. And I conclude by saying two things. Firstly, that this is, of course, a matter that is reserved to the United Kingdom Government. And secondly, where sanctions are applied, and if they're applied in relation to Russia, I am a firm supporter of those sanctions being enforced, because there is no point in applying sanctions to governments that ignore international law, that undermine the rule of law, that invade independent countries in the way that Russia has invaded Ukraine without taking action where those sanctions are applied. And on that point of principle, I'm happy to set out the Scottish Government's position.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a members' debate in the name of Claire Baker, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the public gallery to do so.